The sound of tiny footsteps echoed through the marble corridors of Meridian Motors' executive floor, followed by a man's gentle voice whispering apologies. Marcus Chen adjusted his tie nervously as he guided his 4-year-old twins, Emma and Ethan, past glass offices filled with suits and stern expressions. The children clutched their father's hands tightly, their wide eyes taking in the towering windows and gleaming surfaces of the luxury car dealership's headquarters. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime onto the penthouse garage, revealing rows of exotic vehicles that cost more than most people's homes. Bugattis, McLarens, and Ferraris sat like sleeping giants under pristine spotlights, their paint jobs reflecting rainbow patterns across the polished concrete floor. Marcus had never imagined he'd step foot in such a place, but desperation had driven him here with his resume clutched in one sweaty palm and his children's small hands in the other. The babysitter had canceled last minute, and the interview at Meridian Motors was his only shot at pulling his family out of the financial hole they'd fallen into since his wife Sarah's medical bills had drained their savings. He'd worked as a mechanic for 15 years, but high-end luxury vehicles were a different world entirely. Still, Marcus knew engines, and engines were engines, no matter how many zeros were attached to their price tags. Victoria Sterling emerged from behind a pristine white Lamborghini Aventador, her designer heels clicking against the floor with military precision. At 42, she commanded Meridian Motors with an iron fist wrapped in Italian leather gloves. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her steel-gray eyes surveyed the garage like a general inspecting troops. She had built this empire from the ground up, starting with a single used car lot and transforming it into the premier luxury automotive destination on the West Coast. The moment Victoria's gaze fell upon Marcus and his children, her expression shifted from neutral professionalism to barely concealed disdain. She had been expecting the interview candidate alone, not accompanied by what appeared to be a daycare situation. Her jaw tightened as she watched Emma toddle toward $1 million Koenigsegg, her small fingers reaching toward its gleaming surface. "Excuse me," Victoria's voice cut through the air like a blade. "This is a private facility, not a playground. These vehicles are worth more than most people see in a lifetime." Marcus quickly scooped up Emma before she could touch the car, his face flushing with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, Miss Sterling. I'm Marcus Chen, here for the senior technician interview. My babysitter had an emergency, and I couldn't reschedule. I know it's unprofessional, but I really need this opportunity." Victoria's eyes narrowed as she took in Marcus's appearance. His suit was clean, but clearly secondhand, with small patches where Emma had wiped her sticky fingers during the car ride. His shoes were polished but worn, and there was something desperate in his eyes that made her uncomfortable. She had worked too hard to get where she was to start making exceptions for sob stories. "Mr. Chen," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "this is exactly the kind of judgment I question. If you can't arrange proper childcare for an interview, how can I trust you with vehicles worth $50 million collectively?" She gestured dismissively at the twins, who had grown quiet under her harsh stare. "Perhaps you should focus on finding a position more suited to your current life circumstances. McDonald's is always hiring." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had heard similar comments before, whispered behind his back at parent-teacher conferences and grocery stores. The single dad with twins, clearly in over his head, probably looking for handouts. But, coming from someone who held his family's future in her manicured hands, the humiliation burned deeper than usual. Ethan tugged at his father's sleeve, whispering loudly enough for Victoria to hear. "Daddy, why is the mean lady being mean to us? We didn't break anything." Victoria's expression hardened further. "Control your children, Mr. Chen, or I'll have security escort you out. This interview is over before it began." Marcus felt his last hope crumbling, but as he turned to leave, something caught his eye. Behind Victoria, partially hidden by the Lamborghini, sat a Pagani Huayra with its hood propped open. Even from a distance, he could see the problem. The carbon fiber engine cover was slightly askew, and there was a subtle but telltale hum coming from the electrical system that suggested a grounding issue. His trained ear picked up the irregular idle pattern that would eventually lead to complete engine failure if left untreated. "Your Pagani has a grounding problem," Marcus said quietly, his professional instincts overriding his humiliation. "The alternator connection is loose, probably from the last service. If you don't fix it soon, you'll lose the entire electrical system. Could cost you $30,000 in repairs instead of 30 minutes of work." Victoria paused, one perfectly sculpted eyebrow arching upward. The Pagani had indeed been acting strangely, and her current head technician had spent 3 days trying to diagnose the issue without success. She had been planning to have it towed to the manufacturer's facility in Italy, a process that would take weeks and cost a fortune. "You can tell all that from 20 feet away?" she asked, skepticism lacing her voice. Marcus nodded, his confidence returning slightly. "I've been working on engines since I was 12. My grandfather owned a shop in Detroit, taught me everything he knew. Luxury cars have fancier parts, but the fundamentals are the same. An engine is an engine, whether it's in a Honda Civic or a $2 million hypercar." Victoria studied him for a long moment, her business instincts warring with her initial prejudice. If this man could actually diagnose the Pagani's problem that had stumped her best technician, perhaps she had misjudged him. But the children were still there, still a liability in her pristine garage filled with irreplaceable machines. "Prove it," she said finally. "If you can fix the Pagani in 30 minutes like you claim, I'll consider continuing this interview, but your children stay exactly where they are, and if they so much as breathe on anything else, you're all out permanently." Marcus felt his heart racing as he realized what she was offering. It wasn't just about the job anymore. It was about proving that being a single father didn't make him incompetent, that his love for his children wasn't a weakness, but a strength that drove him to be better at everything he did. He knelt down to Emma and Ethan's level, his voice gentle but firm. "I need you both to be the best-behaved kids in the world for the next half hour, okay? Sit right here by this wall and don't move. Daddy's going to show the mean lady that we're not what she thinks we are." Emma nodded solemnly, her small hand patting her father's cheek. "We'll be good, Daddy. Fix the pretty car." As Marcus approached the Pagani, he could feel Victoria's skeptical gaze boring into his back. The garage fell silent except for the soft hum of climate control systems and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. This was his moment, his chance to prove that worth wasn't measured by the clothes you wore or the zip code you lived in, but by the skill in your hands and the determination in your heart. He rolled up his sleeves and opened his borrowed toolbox, the familiar weight of his instruments bringing him comfort. The Pagani's engine bay was a work of art, all exposed carbon fiber in precisely machined aluminum, but underneath the beauty was a machine that followed the same principles he'd learned in his grandfather's grimy Detroit garage 30 years ago. Within minutes, Marcus had located the loose connection he'd diagnosed from across the room. The previous technician had over-tightened the alternator mounting bolt, causing it to strip slightly and lose proper contact with the grounding strap. It was a rookie mistake that could happen to anyone, but it would have caused cascading electrical failures if left unfixed. As he worked, Marcus became aware that Victoria had moved closer, watching his every move with intense interest. Her initial hostility seemed to be giving way to professional curiosity. She had expected him to fumble around, maybe get lucky, and stumble onto the problem. Instead, she was watching someone who clearly knew exactly what they were doing. "The previous service tech probably used an impact wrench," Marcus explained as he carefully cleaned the contact points. "These European cars have different torque specifications than American vehicles. The bolts look the same, but the metallurgy is different. You have to feel the resistance, not just go by the numbers." Victoria found herself nodding, despite her determination to remain skeptical. She had watched dozens of technicians work on her vehicles over the years, and most of them approached each job with either reverence that bordered on fear or casual arrogance that made her nervous. Marcus displayed neither. He worked with the quiet confidence of someone who had solved thousands of similar problems, treating the million-dollar machine with respect but not intimidation. 23 minutes after he began, Marcus closed the hood and started the engine. The irregular idle was gone, replaced by the smooth purr that had made Pagani famous. The electrical systems all showed green on the dashboard, and the subtle hum that had been bothering Victoria for weeks was completely absent. "How did you know?" Victoria asked, her voice lacking its previous edge. My head technician ran full diagnostics for 3 days and couldn't isolate the problem. Marcus wiped his hands on a shop rag, glancing over at his twins, who had remained perfectly still throughout the entire process. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Their eyes wide with fascination at seeing their father work his magic on something so beautiful and expensive. "Experience," he said simply. "I've made that same mistake myself, back when I was learning. The difference between a good mechanic and a great one isn't knowing everything. It's recognizing the problems you've seen before and knowing how to listen when the car tells you what's wrong." Victoria walked over to the twins, who looked up at her with considerably less fear than before. Emma held up a small drawing she'd been working on while her father fixed the car. It was a crude but recognizable sketch of the Pagani, complete with a stick figure that presumably represented Marcus working under the hood. "For the mean lady?" Emma said with the brutal honesty of a 4-year-old. "So you remember Daddy fixed your car." Something shifted in Victoria's expression as she accepted the drawing. She had spent so many years building walls around herself, protecting her business and her heart from anyone who might take advantage of her success. But looking at these 2 small children who had sat quietly while their father proved his worth, she felt something crack in those carefully constructed barriers. "Thank you, Emma," she said softly, and for the first time since they'd arrived, her voice carried genuine warmth. "This is beautiful." Marcus gathered his tools, unsure of what would happen next. He had proven he could do the work, but Victoria Sterling had a reputation for being unpredictable. She might offer him the job, or she might find some other reason to dismiss him. All he could do was wait and hope that his 30 minutes of work had been enough to change her mind about him and his children. "Mr. Chen," Victoria said, her business voice returning but lacking its previous venom. "I owe you an apology. I made assumptions about you based on your circumstances, rather than your abilities. That was unprofessional and unfair." Marcus felt a glimmer of hope, but he had learned not to count on anything until it was official. "I understand your concerns about the children, Miss Sterling. If there's a way to make this work, I'm willing to discuss arrangements." Victoria looked around her pristine garage, then back at the twins who were now quietly playing with a toy car that Ethan had produced from his pocket. An idea was forming in her mind, something that went against every business instinct she had developed over the years. But sometimes the best decisions were the ones that felt slightly dangerous. "The position is yours if you want it," she said, her words causing Marcus's heart to leap. "But I have conditions. Non-traditional ones that I've never offered before." Marcus nodded eagerly, willing to agree to almost anything at this point. "Your shift starts at 7 a.m. and ends at 3 p.m., so you can pick up your children from school. The garage has a small office that's currently used for storage. We'll convert it into a homework room, where Emma and Ethan can wait for you if needed. In exchange, I expect excellence from you every single day. No exceptions, no excuses. Can you handle that?" Marcus felt tears threatening to spill over as the reality of what she was offering hit him. Not just a job, but a solution to the impossible balancing act he'd been trying to maintain since Sarah's death. A chance to provide for his children while still being present in their lives. "Ms. Sterling," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you won't regret this. I promise you that." Victoria nodded curtly, but Marcus caught the hint of a smile at the corners of her mouth. "We'll see, Mr. Chen. We'll see. Your first day is Monday. Don't be late." As Marcus gathered his children and prepared to leave, Emma tugged at Victoria's designer dress one more time. "Are you still a mean lady?" she asked with the directness that only children possessed. Victoria knelt down to Emma's level, something she hadn't done in years. "I'm trying to be a better lady," she said gently. "Think you and Ethan can help me with that?" Emma nodded seriously. "We're very good helpers. Daddy says so." As the elevator doors closed behind the Chen family, Victoria stood alone in her garage, holding a child's drawing, and wondering what she had just gotten herself into. She had built her empire by being tough, uncompromising, and focused solely on the bottom line. But something about Marcus Chen and his children had touched a part of her she thought she'd buried years ago. She walked over to the Pagani and started it one more time, marveling at the perfect sound of its engine. In 30 minutes, a man she had initially dismissed had accomplished what her highest-paid technician couldn't do in 3 days. Maybe there was more to people than what appeared on the surface. Maybe she had been wrong about a lot of things. The next few days passed quickly as Victoria made arrangements for Marcus's unconventional employment situation. She had her assistant convert the storage room into a comfortable space for the twins, complete with a small table for homework, toys, and even a mini refrigerator stocked with healthy snacks. The other employees were curious about the new arrangement, but Victoria's reputation for swift termination kept the gossip to a minimum. Marcus arrived for his first day 30 minutes early, his twins in tow, and his second-hand toolbox replaced with a professional kit that Victoria had delivered to his apartment over the weekend. She told herself it was a business investment, ensuring her new technician had the proper equipment to maintain her valuable inventory. The morning started smoothly. Marcus quickly familiarized himself with the garage's layout and procedures, while Emma and Ethan settled into their new space with coloring books and educational tablets Victoria had provided. She watched from her office window as Marcus approached his first assignment, a temperamental Ferrari 488 Pista that had been misfiring despite 2 previous attempts at repair. What happened next exceeded even Victoria's elevated expectations. Marcus didn't just fix the Ferrari's ignition issue. He identified and corrected 3 other potential problems that would have caused expensive failures down the road. His work was methodical, thorough, and demonstrated an understanding of high-performance engines that impressed even the dealership's most experienced staff. By noon, word had spread through the building that the new guy with the kids wasn't just competent, he was exceptional. Salespeople who had initially whispered about Victoria's questionable judgment were now asking when Marcus would be available to inspect vehicles for their clients. The quality control manager, a man who rarely praised anyone, stopped by Victoria's office to commend her hiring decision. But it was what happened during lunch that truly opened Victoria's eyes to what she had brought into her world. She was reviewing inventory reports when she heard laughter coming from the garage floor. Curious, she made her way downstairs to investigate. She found Marcus and his twins sitting cross-legged next to a Rolls-Royce Phantom, sharing sandwiches from a brown paper bag. Emma was explaining to her brother how their daddy made the pretty silver car feel better by giving it new medicine for its engine. Ethan nodded seriously, asking questions about pistons and cylinders with the intense curiosity of a 4-year-old who wanted to understand his father's magic. Several of Victoria's employees had gathered around, listening to Marcus explain automotive concepts in terms simple enough for children to grasp. His patience was infinite, his love for his work evident in every word. But more than that, Victoria could see how the other mechanics were learning from his explanations. His ability to break down complex problems into understandable components wasn't just good for teaching children, it was revolutionizing how her team approached diagnostics. "The engine is like a heart," Marcus was saying, pointing to a cutaway model someone had brought over. "It needs to breathe clean air and pump good blood to keep the whole body healthy. When something goes wrong, we have to be like doctors and figure out what's making the heart sick." Victoria found herself stepping closer, drawn into the impromptu lesson despite herself. She had owned this business for 15 years, but she realized she had never truly understood the mechanical poetry that made her vehicles come alive. Marcus wasn't just a technician, he was a teacher, a problem solver, and a bridge between the mystical world of high-performance engineering and the practical reality of keeping machines running smoothly. That afternoon brought Marcus his biggest challenge yet. A customer had brought in a McLaren P1, one of the most technologically advanced vehicles ever produced, complaining of intermittent power loss that occurred only during high-performance driving. The car's computer system showed no error codes, and the issue was so elusive that McLaren's own technicians had been unable to replicate the problem during static testing. Victoria watched as Marcus approached the hybrid hypercar with the same methodical confidence he had shown with the Pagani. But this time, instead of diving immediately into the engine bay, he spent an hour simply sitting in the driver's seat, studying the vehicle's systems and asking detailed questions about exactly when and how the power loss occurred. "It's not a mechanical problem," he announced finally, causing several people to look skeptical. "It's a communication issue between the electric motor and the internal combustion engine during transition phases. The software is getting confused when the system switches between power sources under high load." The diagnosis seemed impossible. The P1's hybrid system was one of the most sophisticated pieces of technology ever installed in a road car, developed by engineers with advanced degrees and decades of experience. How could a mechanic from Detroit identify a software issue that had stumped McLaren's own specialists? But Marcus was already connecting his diagnostic computer, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he accessed subsystems that most technicians never touched. He had spent his previous weekend studying the P1's technical specifications, teaching himself the intricacies of hybrid powertrains with the same determination he brought to providing for his children. "There," he said, pointing to a series of numbers on his screen. "The transition algorithm is using outdated parameters. Someone updated the electric motor's firmware without adjusting the combustion engine's response timing. They're trying to work together, but they're speaking different languages." Within 2 hours, Marcus had recalibrated the hybrid system's communication protocols, transforming the McLaren from a temperamental exotic into the precision instrument it was designed to be. The test drive confirmed what his diagnostic had predicted. The power loss was completely eliminated, replaced by the seamless acceleration that made the P1 legendary among automotive enthusiasts. Word of Marcus's success with the McLaren spread quickly through the luxury car community. By the end of his first week, Victoria's appointment book was filled with owners of rare and expensive vehicles who had heard about the mechanic who could solve problems that stumped factory-trained specialists. The financial impact was immediate and substantial, not just from the repair work, but from the increased trust and reputation that came with having someone truly exceptional on staff. But perhaps the most significant change was in Victoria herself. Each day she found herself spending more time on the garage floor, drawn by the combination of Marcus's expertise and his children's innocent wonder at the mechanical marvels surrounding them. Emma and Ethan had become unofficial mascots, their presence softening the intimidating atmosphere that had previously defined Meridian Motors. She watched as Marcus taught Ethan to identify different engine sounds, the little boy's face lighting up when he correctly distinguished between a V8 and a V12. She saw Emma carefully dusting the interior of a Bentley with a microfiber cloth, taking pride in helping her father maintain the beautiful machines he cared for so expertly. Most importantly, she witnessed the respect and affection her employees were developing for the man she had almost dismissed as a charity case. The transformation wasn't just professional. It was personal. Victoria found herself looking forward to the twins' daily drawings, which had evolved from simple stick figures to surprisingly detailed renderings of the cars their father worked on. She began keeping healthy snacks in her office for when Emma and Ethan visited, and she discovered that their innocent questions often led to insights about her business that she had never considered. 3 weeks into Marcus's employment, Victoria received a call that would test everything they had built together. Richard Blackstone, a collector known for owning some of the rarest vehicles in the world, was bringing in 15 of his most prized supercars for comprehensive service before a prestigious automotive show. The combined value of the collection exceeded $50 million, and the reputation of whoever worked on them would be made or broken by the results. "I want your new miracle worker to handle my entire collection," Blackstone had said during their phone conversation. "I've heard he can diagnose problems that others can't even see. If he's as good as people say, this could be the beginning of a very profitable relationship." Victoria found Marcus in the garage, teaching Emma about tire pressure while Ethan napped in their converted office. Marcus spent 40 minutes simply sitting in the driver's seat, his hands moving over controls and his ears tuned to subtle sounds that others had missed. Finally, he emerged with a diagnosis that seemed impossible. The problem wasn't mechanical at all, but related to the custom carbon fiber bodywork that had been modified from the standard Zonda configuration. The resonance frequency of the modified body panels is interfering with the engine management system's sensors, Marcus explained to Blackstone and Victoria, who had gathered to observe his assessment. At specific RPM ranges, the vibrations create false readings that cause the computer to adjust fuel delivery incorrectly. It's not a defect in the traditional sense, but an unintended consequence of the aerodynamic modifications. Blackstone's expression shifted from skepticism to intense interest. The Pagani had been his most troublesome vehicle, beautiful beyond description, but frustratingly unreliable during spirited driving. 3 world-class facilities had failed to identify the root cause of its problems, each attempting increasingly expensive solutions that never quite resolved the issue. "How do you fix something like that?" Blackstone asked, genuinely curious about Marcus's proposed solution. Marcus smiled, the expression transforming his face from professional competence to genuine enthusiasm. "We isolate the sensors that are being affected and recalibrate the engine management system to ignore the false signals. Then we add a dampening material to the specific body panels that are creating the resonance. It's not a complex repair mechanically, but it requires understanding how all the systems interact with each other." The repair took Marcus 6 hours of meticulous work, during which Emma and Ethan alternated between napping in their office and watching their father perform what seemed like magic on the exotic machines. Other employees found excuses to visit the upper garage, drawn by the rare opportunity to observe master-level automotive craftsmanship being performed on vehicles they might never see again. Victoria noticed how Marcus's approach differed from other technicians she had employed. He didn't just fix problems, he anticipated them, identifying potential issues before they became expensive failures. His work was methodical but intuitive, combining textbook knowledge with an almost supernatural ability to understand what each vehicle needed to perform at its absolute best. The test drive of the Pagani revealed the success of Marcus's diagnosis and repair. The power fluctuations that had plagued the hypercar for months were completely eliminated, replaced by the seamless acceleration and precise control that made driving such a machine an almost religious experience. Blackstone returned from the test drive with the satisfied expression of someone who had finally found what he had been searching for. "Remarkable," Blackstone said as he emerged from the Pagani, his earlier skepticism replaced by genuine admiration. "That car has never performed this well, not even when it was first delivered from the factory. You've made it better than new." The praise meant more to Marcus than any amount of money could have. He had grown up in a world where people were judged by their circumstances rather than their capabilities, where being poor was often equated with being incompetent. But here, in this garage filled with automotive masterpieces, his skills spoke louder than his second-hand clothes, or his status as a single father struggling to make ends meet. As the day progressed, Marcus's reputation among Blackstone's associates began to spread through the exclusive networks that connected serious automotive collectors. Phone calls were made, recommendations shared, and appointments scheduled for vehicles that had been sitting in climate-controlled garages because their owners couldn't find technicians qualified to maintain them properly. Victoria realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in her 15 years of business ownership. Word-of-mouth referrals in the exotic car world typically took months or years to develop, built through careful relationship management and consistent performance over time. But Marcus's exceptional work on Blackstone's collection was generating immediate demand from other collectors who had heard about the miraculous repairs being performed at Meridian Motors. The financial implications were staggering. Each of Blackstone's 15 vehicles represented thousands of dollars in service revenue, but more importantly, they served as advertisements for Marcus's capabilities to the most affluent and demanding customers in the automotive world. Victoria's appointment book was filling with requests from collectors who owned cars worth millions of dollars and had previously taken them to factory-authorized facilities in Europe. But perhaps the most significant change was in the atmosphere of the dealership itself. Marcus's presence had transformed the workplace from a sterile business environment into something resembling an extended family. His twins had become beloved fixtures, their innocent enthusiasm for their father's work creating smiles, even among the most serious employees. The garage that had once been dominated by the pressure to avoid expensive mistakes now buzzed with excitement about the extraordinary machines being entrusted to their care. Emma and Ethan had developed their own routines during their father's workdays, alternating between educational activities Victoria had provided and careful observation of the exotic cars being serviced. They had learned to identify different manufacturers by sound, recognizing the distinctive notes of Ferrari V12s, Lamborghini V10s, and the unique whistle of turbochargers spooling up under acceleration. Their presence had an unexpected effect on the dealership's customers as well. Wealthy collectors who were accustomed to sterile, intimidating service environments found themselves charmed by the children's genuine enthusiasm for automotive craftsmanship. Several had begun bringing their own grandchildren to appointments, creating an atmosphere of shared appreciation for mechanical artistry that transcended economic and social boundaries. Victoria watched this transformation with amazement and growing concern. The success Marcus had brought to her business was undeniable, but it had also attracted attention she wasn't sure she was prepared to handle. Competitors were attempting to poach her star technician with offers that dwarfed his current salary. Automotive journalists were requesting interviews about the mysterious mechanic who was revolutionizing exotic car maintenance. Most troubling of all, her own father had begun making phone calls, expressing interest in the sudden profitability of the business he had written off as a foolish venture years earlier. Gregory Sterling had built his fortune in real estate development, viewing his daughter's automotive dealership as an expensive hobby that would eventually require his financial rescue. Victoria's success had been a source of grudging pride for him, but the explosive growth following Marcus's arrival had awakened his business instincts and his desire to control profitable ventures within the family portfolio. The confrontation Victoria had been dreading came on a Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks after Blackstone's collection had established Marcus as the most sought-after exotic car technician on the West Coast. Gregory Sterling arrived unannounced, his presence immediately changing the atmosphere of the dealership as employees recognized the man whose investments had funded Victoria's original expansion plans. At 72, Gregory retained the commanding presence that had made him a formidable negotiator in business deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars. His silver hair was immaculately styled, his custom suits perfectly fitted, and his eyes held the calculating intelligence of someone who had built an empire through careful analysis of opportunities and weaknesses. He found Marcus in the upper garage, working on a Ferrari LaFerrari that belonged to a tech billionaire who had flown in from Silicon Valley specifically to have his hybrid hypercar serviced by the man everyone was talking about. Emma and Ethan were in their converted office, working on homework assignments with the quiet concentration their father had taught them to maintain during business hours. "So you're the miracle worker I've been hearing about," Gregory said, his tone carrying the authority of someone accustomed to immediate attention and respect. "Victoria tells me you've transformed her little car business into something profitable." "Impressive work." Marcus looked up from the Ferrari's complex hybrid system, immediately recognizing the family resemblance between Victoria and her father, despite the vast difference in their approaches to interacting with people. Where Victoria had learned to temper her authority with respect for others, Gregory radiated the casual arrogance of someone who had never needed to consider perspectives other than his own. "I just try to do good work, Mr. Sterling," Marcus replied diplomatically, understanding that this unexpected visit represented some kind of test or evaluation that could affect his family's future. Gregory walked around the Ferrari, his experienced eyes taking in the sophisticated diagnostic equipment and the methodical organization that characterized Marcus's workspace. He had expected to find the kind of mechanic Victoria might hire: competent, but unremarkable, someone who could maintain vehicles adequately, but would never attract the kind of high-profile clientele that generated serious profits. Instead, he was observing someone who clearly understood not just the mechanical aspects of exotic car maintenance, but the business implications of exceptional service in an exclusive market. The appointment book on Marcus's workstation showed scheduled services for vehicles worth over $200 million collectively, representing revenue streams that most luxury dealerships could only dream of achieving. "Victoria mentioned you have children," Gregory said, his gaze shifting toward the converted office where Emma and Ethan were visible through the observation window. "Twins, I believe. That must make maintaining a demanding work schedule quite challenging." Marcus felt the implied criticism in Gregory's words, recognizing the familiar suggestion that being a single parent somehow compromised his professional capabilities. He had heard similar comments countless times over the past year from prospective employers who viewed his children as liabilities rather than motivations for excellence. "My children understand the importance of good work," Marcus said carefully. "They've learned to be patient and respectful while I'm helping customers. If anything, they motivate me to be better at everything I do." Gregory nodded noncommittally, but his attention had shifted to the financial reports Victoria had provided during their private meeting earlier that afternoon. The numbers were remarkable. Revenue increases of over 300% in the weeks following Marcus's employment, with profit margins that exceeded industry standards by significant amounts. The waiting list for service appointments now extended 3 months into the future, with customers willing to pay premium prices for access to Marcus's expertise. More intriguing from Gregory's business perspective was the demographic profile of the new clientele. These weren't merely wealthy car enthusiasts, but ultra-high net worth individuals whose automotive collections represented only small portions of their total assets. The relationships Marcus was building through exceptional service could potentially be leveraged into far more lucrative opportunities in real estate, private equity, and other investment sectors that comprised Gregory's primary business interests. "I'm curious about your long-term plans," Gregory said, his voice taking on the persuasive tone that had closed hundreds of major business deals over the decades. "A man with your talents could accomplish remarkable things, with proper backing and strategic planning. Have you ever considered expanding beyond automotive service into related business opportunities?" Marcus sensed the direction of Gregory's questions and felt a familiar uneasiness settling in his stomach. He had learned to be wary of wealthy people who showed sudden interest in his capabilities, understanding that their motivations rarely aligned with his own priorities of providing stability and security for his children. "I'm focused on doing the best possible work for Mrs. Sterling and her customers," Marcus replied diplomatically. "Beyond that, I try not to get ahead of myself with ambitious plans." Gregory smiled, recognizing the careful diplomacy in Marcus's response, while noting the subtle emphasis on loyalty to Victoria rather than to the broader Sterling family business interests. This was clearly someone who understood the importance of maintaining professional relationships while avoiding commitments that might compromise his independence. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of another transport truck carrying 3 additional vehicles from Blackstone's expanding collection. Word of Marcus's exceptional work had convinced the collector to entrust even more of his prized automobiles to Meridian Motors, including a McLaren P1 GTR that existed as one of only 58 ever produced. Gregory watched as Marcus immediately shifted his attention to the arriving vehicles, his professionalism and expertise evident in every interaction with the transport crew, and the priceless machines being carefully positioned in the garage. This wasn't someone playing a role or trying to impress an audience. This was a master craftsman completely absorbed in work that obviously brought him genuine satisfaction and purpose. The realization both impressed and concerned Gregory. In his experience, the most valuable employees were those motivated primarily by financial incentives, making them predictable and controllable through carefully structured compensation packages. But Marcus seemed driven by internal standards that couldn't easily be purchased or manipulated, suggesting that any business relationship would need to be built on mutual respect rather than economic leverage. Victoria appeared in the garage as Gregory was concluding his evaluation of Marcus and the operation her employee had transformed. She had been expecting this visit since the dramatic increase in revenue had attracted her father's attention, understanding that his involvement could either accelerate her business growth or completely undermine the workplace culture that made her success possible. "Impressive operation you've built here," Gregory said to his daughter, his tone carrying undertones of surprise that Victoria had achieved something genuinely significant without his direct involvement. "This Marcus fellow has quite remarkable abilities. Have you considered the broader implications of what he's accomplished?" Victoria felt her stomach tighten as she recognized the calculating expression that had preceded her father's involvement in numerous business ventures over the years. She had worked too hard to build Meridian Motors into something she could be proud of to watch it become another asset in Gregory's portfolio, managed by executives who understood balance sheets but had never experienced the satisfaction of solving complex mechanical problems. "Marcus is an exceptional employee," Victoria said carefully. "We're fortunate to have him on our team, and I intend to ensure he remains happy working here for a very long time." Gregory nodded, but his attention had already shifted to the broader strategic possibilities that Marcus's success represented. The relationships being built with ultra-wealthy collectors could be leveraged into opportunities worth hundreds of millions of dollars if approached properly. The key would be convincing Marcus to expand his role beyond simple automotive service into the kind of comprehensive luxury lifestyle management that the wealthiest clients were willing to pay premium prices to obtain. "We should discuss this privately," Gregory said to Victoria, his words carrying the implicit command that had characterized their relationship since her childhood. "There are opportunities here that extend far beyond automotive service, but they'll require careful planning and significant investment to realize properly." As Gregory left the garage, Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning system. He had encountered men like Victoria's father before. Successful, powerful individuals who viewed other people as resources to be optimized rather than human beings with their own priorities and values. The attention was flattering in some ways, but it also represented a potential threat to the stability he had worked so hard to build for Emma and Ethan. Victoria lingered in the garage after her father's departure, ostensibly reviewing Marcus's work on the McLaren P1 GTR, but actually processing the implications of Gregory's unexpected visit. She had spent years establishing her independence from her father's business empire, building something that reflected her own values and vision, rather than simply generating maximum financial returns. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Sterling?" Marcus asked, noting the tension in Victoria's posture and the distracted quality of her attention. Victoria looked at him with an expression that mixed gratitude with concern, understanding that his exceptional work had created both unprecedented opportunities and potentially serious complications for everyone involved. The success she had dreamed of achieving was finally within reach, but it had also attracted forces that could destroy everything she valued about the business she had built. "I hope so, Marcus," she said quietly. "I really hope so." The remainder of the week passed with deceptive normalcy, Marcus continuing his exceptional work while Victoria attempted to navigate the increasing pressure from her father to expand their operation into areas that would compromise the intimate, family-oriented atmosphere that made Meridian Motors special. Phone calls arrived daily from potential investors, automotive journalists, and competitors attempting to understand the source of the dealership's sudden success. But it was Emma's innocent question on Friday afternoon that crystallized the challenge they were all facing. "Daddy," she said as Marcus was finishing his work on a Lamborghini Aventador SVJ, "why did the scary man in the fancy suit keep staring at us yesterday? Did we do something wrong?" Marcus realized that his daughter had perceived the calculating assessment in Gregory Sterling's gaze, recognizing on an instinctive level that they were being evaluated as potential assets rather than valued as human beings. The recognition filled him with a protective fury that he struggled to keep hidden from his children. "No, sweetheart," he said gently, lifting Emma into his arms. "You and Ethan have been perfect. Some people just look at the world differently than we do, that's all." But as Marcus carried his children to their car at the end of another successful day, he couldn't shake the feeling that the stability he had worked so hard to build was about to be tested in ways he had never anticipated. The success that should have represented security for his family was instead attracting attention that could ultimately destroy everything he valued most. Victoria watched them leave from her office window, understanding that the next few weeks would determine whether the miraculous transformation Marcus had brought to her business would survive the interference of people who measured success only in financial terms. She had found something precious in the combination of exceptional work and genuine human connection that characterized her current operation, but preserving it would require fighting battles she had hoped never to face again. The stage was set for a confrontation between two very different visions of success, one based on maximizing profits and expanding market control, the other founded on the belief that the most valuable accomplishments were those that honored both excellence and humanity. The outcome would determine not just the future of Meridian Motors, but the fate of a single father and his children who had transformed a business simply by bringing their authentic selves to work each day. The confrontation Victoria had been dreading arrived on a rain-soaked Tuesday morning when Gregory Sterling returned to Meridian Motors with a team of business consultants and financial analysts. The entourage swept through the dealership like a corporate invasion, their expensive suits and briefcases creating an atmosphere of cold efficiency that contrasted sharply with the warm, family-oriented environment Marcus had helped foster. Marcus was in the middle of calibrating the suspension system on a Porsche 918 Spyder when the group entered the upper garage, their polished shoes clicking against the concrete floor with military precision. Emma and Ethan looked up from their coloring books with wide eyes, sensing the tension that suddenly filled the air like an approaching storm. "Gentlemen, this is the operation I've been describing," Gregory announced to his associates, his voice carrying the authority of someone presenting a valuable acquisition. "As you can see, we have a unique opportunity to capitalize on exceptional talent and establish a dominant position in the luxury automotive service market." Victoria followed the group with growing alarm, recognizing the calculated assessment in their eyes as they evaluated her business like a piece of real estate to be developed. These weren't people who appreciated the artistry of Marcus's work or the genuine relationships he had built with customers. They saw only revenue streams and expansion opportunities that could be leveraged into maximum profitability. The lead consultant, a sharp-faced woman named Rebecca Walsh, approached Marcus with the predatory smile of someone who had orchestrated dozens of business acquisitions. Her assessment was thorough and impersonal, taking note of his equipment, his methods, and the obvious respect he commanded from other employees. "Mr. Chen, I presume," she said, extending a manicured hand that Marcus accepted reluctantly. "Your reputation precedes you. We've been reviewing your performance metrics, and the results are quite impressive. Revenue increases of over 400% in just 6 weeks. Remarkable achievements. Marcus felt uncomfortable under the scrutiny of the corporate team, understanding that they were evaluating him like a machine whose productivity could be optimized and scaled. Their interest had nothing to do with his passion for automotive craftsmanship or his dedication to providing for his children. He was simply a valuable asset whose potential they wanted to exploit. "I just try to do good work for our customers," Marcus replied diplomatically, hoping to deflect their attention without creating conflict that might jeopardize his employment. Rebecca's smile widened as she recognized the humble deflection, interpreting it as evidence that Marcus didn't fully understand his own market value. In her experience, such individuals were often the most profitable to acquire and develop, since they could be convinced to accept modest compensation increases in exchange for significantly expanded responsibilities. "Mr. Sterling has asked us to develop a comprehensive expansion plan that would leverage your unique capabilities," she explained, pulling out a tablet displaying financial projections and organizational charts. "We're envisioning a network of premium service centers across major metropolitan areas, with you serving as the technical director and primary trainer for a team of specialized technicians." The proposal was impressive in its scope and ambition. Gregory's consultants had identified locations in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Miami, and New York, where Marcus's reputation could be leveraged into profitable satellite operations. The financial projections showed potential revenues in the hundreds of millions of dollars within 5 years, with Marcus receiving a significant equity stake in exchange for his commitment to the expansion plan. But as Marcus studied the organizational charts and operational procedures, he realized that accepting such an opportunity would fundamentally change everything about his current life. The intimate workshop environment where he could bring his children to work would disappear, replaced by corporate facilities where personal relationships were subordinated to productivity metrics. His role would shift from hands-on craftsman to business executive, spending more time in conference rooms than working on the machines he loved. "It's certainly ambitious," Marcus said carefully, handing the tablet back to Rebecca while trying to process the implications of what they were proposing. "But I'm happy with my current situation. Mrs. Sterling has been very good to me and my children." The response clearly wasn't what the consultants had expected. In their experience, talented individuals from modest backgrounds jumped at opportunities for dramatic financial advancement, especially when those opportunities came with prestigious titles and significant autonomy. Marcus's apparent lack of enthusiasm suggested either that he didn't understand the offer's value or that he had priorities beyond maximum earning potential. Gregory stepped forward, his expression shifting from businesslike confidence to paternal concern, as he recognized that Marcus wouldn't be easily convinced through conventional incentives. His decades of experience in high-stakes negotiations had taught him to identify what motivated different types of people, and Marcus clearly required a more personalized approach. "Marcus, may I speak with you privately?" Gregory asked, his tone suggesting that refusal wasn't really an option. "I think there are aspects of this opportunity that you might not be considering fully." They moved to Victoria's office, leaving the consultants to continue their evaluation of the garage operations. Through the glass windows, Marcus could see Emma and Ethan watching anxiously from their converted office, sensing that something important was happening but unable to understand its implications for their small family's future. Gregory settled into Victoria's chair with the casual authority of someone who had grown accustomed to being the most powerful person in any room. His approach was subtle but calculated, beginning with expressions of admiration for Marcus's work before gradually introducing concerns about long-term security and opportunity. "You're an exceptional technician," Gregory began, his voice carrying genuine respect mixed with strategic persuasion. "But exceptional talent deserves exceptional rewards. What you've accomplished here in just 6 weeks is remarkable, but it's only a fraction of what you could achieve with proper backing and strategic planning." Marcus listened politely, understanding that Gregory was building towards something but uncertain about the ultimate direction of the conversation. The older man's reputation for business acumen was well established, and his obvious interest in Marcus's capabilities was both flattering and concerning. "I've been reviewing your background," Gregory continued, pulling out a file that contained more information about Marcus's personal history than seemed possible to acquire through normal channels. "Single father, struggling financially after your wife's medical expenses, working multiple jobs to keep your family afloat. You've shown remarkable resilience, but you're still one major crisis away from losing everything you've worked to build." The words hit Marcus like physical blows, not because they were cruel, but because they were accurate. Despite his success at Meridian Motors, his financial situation remained precarious. The apartment he shared with Emma and Ethan was adequate, but expensive, and his savings account contained barely enough to cover a single month's expenses if something went wrong with his employment. "What I'm offering is security," Gregory said, his voice taking on the persuasive tone that had closed hundreds of major business deals. "Not just a job, but ownership in something that could provide for your children's entire futures. College educations, medical care, opportunities you could never afford on a technician's salary, no matter how talented you might be." The appeal was skillfully crafted, targeting Marcus's deepest fears and strongest motivations. As a single father, his greatest terror was the possibility that his children might suffer because of his inability to provide adequately for their needs. The expansion plan Gregory's consultants had developed would indeed generate enough wealth to eliminate such concerns permanently. But Marcus had learned to be suspicious of offers that seemed too good to be true, especially when they came from people whose primary motivation was their own profit, rather than his family's well-being. His experience with wealthy individuals had taught him that their generosity usually came with strings attached that weren't immediately apparent. "What about Mrs. Sterling?" Marcus asked, recognizing that accepting Gregory's offer would likely mean abandoning the woman who had given him a chance when everyone else saw only a desperate single father with too many complications. Gregory's expression hardened slightly, revealing the calculating intelligence that had built his business empire through strategic acquisitions and market manipulation. His relationship with Victoria had always been complicated, mixing genuine paternal pride with frustration at her insistence on maintaining independence from his broader business interests. "Victoria is a capable businesswoman, but she lacks the vision to fully capitalize on what you've created here," Gregory replied, his tone suggesting that such limitations were disappointing but not surprising. "She's content with modest success when extraordinary achievement is possible. That's a luxury you can't afford as a single father with 2 children depending on you." The criticism of Victoria stung Marcus more than any personal attack could have. He had witnessed her dedication to building something meaningful rather than simply profitable. Her willingness to accommodate his children's needs when other employers would have seen them only as liabilities. The suggestion that such values represented weakness rather than strength revealed more about Gregory's character than he probably intended. "I need to think about this," Marcus said, standing to indicate that the conversation was over, despite Gregory's obvious intention to continue pressing his case. Gregory nodded, understanding that pushing too hard would likely backfire with someone who clearly valued independence and personal integrity. But as Marcus left the office, the older man's expression suggested that he wasn't accustomed to having his offers declined and wouldn't accept refusal as a final answer. The remainder of the day passed with uncomfortable tension as Gregory's consultants continued their evaluation of the dealership's operations. They interviewed employees, reviewed financial records, and took detailed measurements of workspace efficiency, with the thoroughness of people planning a complete transformation rather than simple improvements. Victoria watched the process with growing anger, understanding that her father was essentially conducting a hostile takeover of the business she had built through years of careful planning and personal sacrifice. The consultants weren't interested in preserving the workplace culture that made Meridian Motors special. They saw only inefficiencies to be eliminated and profit margins to be optimized. The breaking point came when Rebecca Walsh approached Emma and Ethan's converted office with a measuring tape and clipboard, clearly evaluating the space for alternative uses that would generate revenue rather than accommodating an employee's childcare needs. The sight of a stranger calculating how to eliminate the accommodation that had made Marcus's employment possible triggered something fierce and protective in Victoria's normally controlled personality. "That space is not available for evaluation," Victoria said, her voice carrying an authority that made the consultant step back instinctively. Rebecca's expression shifted from professional courtesy to barely concealed irritation as she realized that Victoria wasn't cooperating with the assessment process her team had been hired to conduct. In her experience, family members of business owners were usually the most enthusiastic supporters of expansion plans that would increase their personal wealth significantly. "Miss Sterling, I think there might be some misunderstanding about the scope of our engagement," Rebecca replied, her tone suggesting that Victoria's objections were both unreasonable and temporary. "Your father has asked us to evaluate all aspects of the current operation to identify optimization opportunities. Every square foot of space represents potential revenue that should be analyzed properly." The confrontation attracted the attention of other employees, who gathered to witness what appeared to be a fundamental conflict over the future direction of their workplace. Many of them had grown fond of Emma and Ethan, viewing the children as symbols of the family-oriented atmosphere that made Meridian Motors different from other luxury automotive businesses. "My father doesn't own this business," Victoria said clearly, her words carrying across the garage floor with unmistakable finality. "I do, and I'm terminating your engagement effective immediately. Please gather your materials and leave." The declaration created a moment of stunned silence as everyone present realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. Gregory Sterling wasn't accustomed to having his business decisions challenged, especially not by family members whose success he had helped enable through years of financial support and strategic guidance. Gregory emerged from Victoria's office with an expression that mixed surprise with cold anger, having overheard his daughter's dismissal of the consultants he had hired to develop what he considered a mutually beneficial expansion plan. The public nature of the confrontation had transformed a private family disagreement into a professional humiliation that wouldn't be easily forgotten or forgiven. "Victoria, I think we need to discuss this situation more thoroughly," Gregory said, his voice carrying undertones of threat that everyone present recognized, despite his careful diplomatic phrasing. But Victoria had reached a decision point that had been building for weeks, understanding that preserving what she valued about her business would require rejecting her father's vision of success, regardless of the personal and professional consequences. She had built Meridian Motors to prove that a business could be both profitable and humane, treating employees as human beings rather than simply resources to be optimized. "There's nothing to discuss," Victoria replied, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was risking. "This business operates according to my values and priorities, not yours. If that's unacceptable to you, then perhaps it's time to reevaluate our entire relationship." The words hung in the air like a challenge that everyone understood could fundamentally change the dynamics of both the Sterling family and the business that had brought them together. Gregory had invested significant amounts of money in Victoria's original expansion plans, loans that could theoretically be called due if their relationship deteriorated beyond repair. Marcus watched the confrontation with growing alarm, understanding that his presence and success had catalyzed a conflict that could destroy the stability both he and Victoria had worked to build. His exceptional work had attracted attention that neither of them had been prepared to handle, creating opportunities that came with costs they hadn't anticipated. Emma and Ethan pressed against the window of their office, their young faces reflecting confusion and fear as they witnessed the adults around them engaged in what appeared to be a serious argument. Their father's expression was tense and worried, while the woman they had grown to love was standing very straight and speaking in the firm voice she used when something important was happening. The resolution came with unexpected suddenness, as Gregory realized that his daughter's resistance wasn't a negotiating tactic, but a fundamental rejection of his values and methods. Victoria had inherited his intelligence and determination, but she had also developed an independence that made her immune to the financial leverage he typically used to control business relationships. "I see," Gregory said quietly, his tone suggesting that he understood more than just Victoria's immediate decision. "In that case, I believe our business relationship has run its course. You'll be hearing from my attorneys regarding the outstanding loans and investment agreements." The threat was clear and devastating. Without Gregory's financial backing, Victoria would be forced to scale back operations significantly, or possibly lose the business entirely. But as Marcus watched her face, he saw no indication that she regretted her decision or intended to compromise her principles to avoid the consequences. "I understand," Victoria replied, her voice remaining steady despite the personal and professional earthquake she had just triggered. "I'll have my attorneys contact yours to arrange an orderly transition." Gregory nodded curtly and gathered his consultants, their departure creating a vacuum of tension that left everyone wondering what would happen next. The confrontation had resolved nothing, while potentially destroying everything, leaving Victoria, Marcus, and the other employees to face an uncertain future with dramatically reduced resources and support. As the garage returned to its normal operations, Marcus approached Victoria with an expression that mixed gratitude with concern. He understood that she had sacrificed her relationship with her father to preserve the workplace environment that allowed him to provide for his children while pursuing work he genuinely loved. "Mrs. Sterling," he began, struggling to find words adequate to express what her decision meant to him and his family. Victoria held up a hand, stopping him before he could continue. You don't need to say anything, Marcus. What we've built here is worth fighting for, regardless of the cost. We'll find a way to make it work. The next several weeks tested that determination as Victoria scrambled to secure alternative financing while maintaining operations with reduced cash flow. Several employees left for more secure positions, unwilling to risk their own financial stability on Victoria's ability to navigate the crisis her father's withdrawal had created. But Marcus remained, along with most of the core staff who had witnessed the transformation he had brought to their workplace. Together, they developed creative solutions to reduce expenses while maintaining the quality of service that had attracted their exclusive clientele. Equipment was leased rather than purchased, administrative functions were streamlined, and everyone accepted temporary salary reductions to help the business survive its transition to independence. The automotive community's response to the crisis surprised everyone involved. Collectors who had experienced Marcus's exceptional work began making advance payments for future services, essentially providing interest-free loans to ensure that Meridian Motors remained operational. Word spread through exclusive networks that Gregory Sterling's daughter was fighting to preserve something valuable, and wealthy individuals who rarely concerned themselves with other people's business problems began offering their support. Richard Blackstone emerged as an unexpected ally, using his influence to direct additional customers to Victoria's dealership, while also providing introductions to investors who specialized in supporting small businesses with exceptional reputations. His endorsement carried tremendous weight in the luxury automotive world, opening doors that would have remained closed to Victoria's efforts alone. "You've built something special here," Blackstone told Victoria during one of his visits to check on a newly acquired Bugatti Divo. "Your father may not understand its value, but those of us who benefit from Marcus's work certainly do. We have a vested interest in ensuring this operation continues." The financial restructuring took 3 months to complete, during which Victoria demonstrated the same determination and business acumen that had originally built Meridian Motors into a successful enterprise. She negotiated new banking relationships, established partnerships with suppliers, and created operational efficiencies that actually improved the business's long-term prospects despite the initial crisis. Marcus contributed to the effort by working longer hours and taking on additional responsibilities, his dedication inspiring other employees to exceed their normal performance levels. Emma and Ethan adapted to their father's increased workload with the resilience that children often display when facing adversity alongside parents they trust completely. The transformation wasn't without its costs. Victoria's relationship with her father remained fractured, their communication limited to formal legal proceedings related to the dissolution of their business partnership. The stress of fighting for her company's survival took a physical and emotional toll that would require years to fully overcome. But by the end of the process, Meridian Motors had emerged as something stronger and more sustainable than it had been under Gregory's influence. Free from the pressure to maximize profits at any cost, Victoria was able to focus on building the kind of business she had always envisioned, one that honored both excellence and humanity in equal measure. The success became evident in ways that couldn't be measured solely through financial metrics. Employee turnover dropped to virtually zero, as people realized they were part of something genuinely special. Customer loyalty reached levels that competitors found impossible to match, with collectors traveling across the country specifically to have their vehicles serviced by Marcus and his team. Most importantly, the workplace culture that had attracted so much positive attention was not only preserved, but strengthened. Emma and Ethan remained beloved fixtures in their converted office, their presence serving as a daily reminder that the most valuable accomplishments were those that enhanced rather than diminished human dignity. On a warm Friday afternoon, exactly 1 year after Gregory's consultants had attempted to transform Meridian Motors into a corporate acquisition, Victoria found Marcus in the upper garage working on a recently completed restoration of a 1967 Ferrari 275 GTB4. The classic car gleamed under the specialized lighting, its aluminum bodywork reflecting the care and expertise that had returned it to better than original condition. Emma and Ethan were helping clean the workspace, their small hands carefully organizing tools with the precision their father had taught them. They had grown during their time at the dealership, not just physically but in confidence and curiosity about the mechanical world that surrounded them daily. "Any regrets?" Victoria asked Marcus, gesturing toward the beautiful scene of craftsmanship and family cooperation that had become emblematic of everything she valued about her business. Marcus looked up from his final inspection of the Ferrari's engine bay, his face showing the satisfaction that came from work performed to the highest possible standards. Over the past year, he had established himself as one of the most respected automotive technicians in the world, with a waiting list of customers that extended months into the future. But more importantly, he had found a way to provide for his children while pursuing work that brought him genuine fulfillment. Emma and Ethan were thriving in an environment where their presence was welcomed, rather than merely tolerated, surrounded by adults who cared about their well-being and development. "None at all," Marcus replied, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had discovered that the most valuable successes were those that honored all aspects of human experience rather than sacrificing personal values for professional advancement. Victoria nodded, understanding that they had both learned something important about the relationship between achievement and integrity. The business they had built together was smaller than what Gregory's expansion plan might have created, but it was also more sustainable and more meaningful to everyone involved. As the afternoon sun streamed through the garage windows, illuminating the restored Ferrari and the small family that had helped transform a luxury automotive dealership into something approaching a work of art, Victoria realized that they had accomplished something far more significant than financial success. They had proven that excellence and compassion weren't mutually exclusive, and that the most profound victories were often those that preserved rather than sacrificed the things that mattered most. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.